Well, hello everyone. I'm recording this short video to try to go over what you have in printed form available to you. This is designed for CLU classes, but it could apply to other classes that I teach in the college district. The idea here is that everyone has a kind of learning style. Some people can read material, and that's the best way that they get the message. Other folks, kind of are visual learners. That's why I have the philosophy videos for you to watch, and they've got good production values because you have available to you 3 videos on these 3 moral theories that are going to dominate our discussions in terms of how we apply issues in social ethics or business ethics in the CLU courses. So, the video, and we have our live chats, and in our live chat, I've kind of gone over the 3 moral theories that we're not going to use, and it just as it kind of set the stage a little bit. The moral theory that's termed divine command theory is the notion that's kind of simple. It's that morality is just, what the supernatural says it is. In other words, what God says is moral, and what's immoral is what God says is immoral. Now, that paradigm pretty much dominated the Middle Ages in Europe when the church was wedded to the state, and that was the Church of Rome. But that all kinds of runs its course during the Reformation and during the Enlightenment, when now you've got different faiths. In other words, still Christian faith, still using the Bible, but with different interpretations. And in other areas of human endeavor, there was an explosion of activity in the sciences, the printing press, literacy among the general population, etc. And philosophy was no exception in terms of trying to redefine itself. And the Enlightenment produced Jeremy Bentham, who was a social justice kind of person. He wanted to see things change in England for the better. He thought the living conditions of many people were miserable, etc. And he became known as a father of utilitarianism. And he starts with a very simple foundation, the idea that a better overall state of affairs, a pleasurable state of affairs, is better than a bad state of affairs, a miserable state of affairs. And therefore, the goal of morality should be to make things better, all persons considered. In other words, it's not moral egoism. It's not just making it better for yourself. It's about the group. And so he pushed this thinking into a philosophy that he developed in some detail. Now, this is, again, covered in the video. It's covered in the written material that I have for you, and then we'll talk about this with some thought exercises in our live chats. But in this short video, the purpose is I want you to understand that this theory was criticized very quickly because it seemed that the ends justified the means. In other words, in the reading material, you have this thing about Dr. Consequentialist who, is a utilitarian, and you check into the hospital, and by coincidence, you have 10 organs that he could transplant into people who otherwise would die without those organs. And it would seem that, morally speaking, he should harvest your organs. Well, that's a little shocking. That doesn't somehow sound right. So to answer those kinds of questions, the utilitarians sophisticated their doctrine a little bit to accommodate that with a rule version. And in this rule version, you can't just look at the short term. So Dr. Consequentialist is only looking at the short term, what's right in front of him. And he's not thinking that, wow, you're going to destroy the medical profession. People won't go to a doctor if they're going to be dissected. And even if you try to cover that up and just say, oh, I don't know, Doug just passed on us. Cover-ups can often become uncovered, and that would really be even more devastating. That physicians not only harvested your organs, they lied about it. So you can have the utilitarian is kind of not, as it was stated in a video, doesn't run away from criticisms historically. They've embraced them and just tried to sophisticate their theory. But it still leaves everyone with this haunting question about, does the end justify the means? And then, of course, the big problem, the huge problem, is does that outcome that we're trying to manipulate always happen? In other words, could a different outcome prevail that didn't generate the greatest good for the greatest number, and therefore it's like the rug's been pulled out from underneath you. You maybe broken some rules, or you broken with tradition, and you've done some things to try to make things better, but it's all backfired. Again, this is just a quick little scenario, or video rather, that will not replace the in-depth reading you should do on these moral theories. But this hopefully gives you enough of an overview to make you want to learn a little bit more in those other venues. Now, Immanuel Kant, a contemporary of Bentham in a sense, and he's not buying this outcome-based morality. In other words, he's thinking that, look, how do you know that the outcome that you are trying to achieve will happen? And that's just really a shaky foundation. So he wants to create a more solid foundation. Kant uses terminology that is daunting. Even the deontology that's been subscribed to this theory is, not everyday terminology. But it basically, in Kant's world, he's going to insist on what he calls categorical imperatives. They're like axioms in math. I mean, this is the foundation of stuff. And his first one has to do with universality. In other words, if I'm going to do an action, it should be an action that I'm willing to do at all times and at all places, and have all others also comply with. So there would be consistency. And he thought consistency was extraordinarily important to morality. You had a duty to be consistent. Okay. The second categorical imperative, he thought, was just a mirror of that, but it doesn't sound like it. It's that, don't use persons as a means to an end unless you have their voluntary consent. Now, you might often think that your employer is using you as a means to an end, but they are, and in a business model. But it's a voluntary operation. In other words, you're not a slave. I mean, there were such things as slaves, and slaves had no choice. That would be immoral in Kant's world, because you'd be using a person as a means to an end without their consent, but not so much in a business setting. Okay. Now, these duties, a little tricky. Positive duties are considered imperfect, and positive and imperfect, that doesn't seem to match, but here's the thinking. A positive duty in Kant's world are things you can do, things that you're not prohibited from doing. And in those cases, you have discretion. The moral agent is not, forced into a certain kind of thing. In the reading material, you'll see this thing like the use of your money. Maybe you have a hobby and you want to purchase things that you've earned, money that you've got in a just and legal way, and you want to spend that money on something that you enjoy. You have discretion to do that. It wouldn't be the case. The tug wouldn't be the same as if a utilitarian might ask you, well, wait a minute, might not that money be better sent to famine relief? Wouldn't that create a greater good for the greater number? But you have discretion in these terms of these positive duties, things that you can do. Kant, on the other hand, developed what has been termed negative duties, do nots, and the illustration of the video was do not lie, that are not negotiable. You don't get to change them to suit yourself or suit circumstances, and they're perfect because perfection is not modifiable. I'm not going to go into this too much because this needs to be a short video, but it's clear that that creates problems in the real world, the negative duties, and there's some illustrations for that in the book, in the printed material from the book, and also that was in the videos. Now I'm going to try to transition here, if I can get this to pop up, to the other and last theory that we'll hit, and that's Aristotle's virtue ethics. A whole different ball game. I have to keep looking at the clock because this video has a certain time span. Aristotle's virtue ethics, way back 2,000 years ago, before the Middle Ages. way before the Enlightenment. And he talked about morality in terms of building a character, not about rule following, not about telling you to maximize the greatest good for the greatest number, but in terms of virtues, kinds of things that you might subscribe to people that you know that seem to make the right decisions. They just have a good moral sense to them. It's been criticized historically as vague. I mean, it's like common sense, moral common sense. Well, what is common sense? I mean, how do you describe that? Well, you just know it when you see it, kind of thing, But this theory is a valid moral theory, and it protects itself somewhat with the concept of the mean. The mean is the notion that you can't be extreme in your virtues. You can't be the suicide bomber whose love of country and self-sacrifice and courage is so extreme that carnage results in terms of trying to promote an agenda by killing innocent, or in their view, not innocent, but civilians and women and children kind of thing, because that's the way you want to get justice. So the concept of the mean is important for this theory, and again, I'm not going to go into this much more because it's a theory that you should carefully watch the video and carefully read about, but it's a totally different kind of theory, and it's made a comeback in the 20th century because this theory allows for emotions, controlled emotions, but emotion nonetheless, like compassion and other caring, to be part of moral decision making. And again, this is just a down and dirty overview to just help you a little bit more. I'm trying to do a three-pronged attack on understanding here. So don't neglect the videos, don't neglect the reading materials, and then of course at the live chats we can obtain more clarification on things. Okay, and I hope this also will help in terms of basic understanding for the quiz that you'll be taking. All right, folks. Well, good luck with things. Thanks for watching.